Tanks. That's right, it's a symbol of World War Two, and I blame my grandfather for that as he sat me down on his knee and we watched loads of black and white war movies as well as hearing his stories. However, it got me interested in actually wanting to draw these things as well as making this huge artwork called believe it or not, World War Two. It's a massive A2 piece, and what I'm focusing on here are tanks. So this is a Tiger tank. This was the main battle tank of the German army. And one thing I would actually have to say for anyone who's trying to get into drawing, draw something where you can actually see the shapes that make up the object. So for this, you can actually see the rectangles, the circles, the squares, and you put them all together, and Bob's your uncle, you got yourself a tank. This is a T-34 tank. This was the Russians' main battle tank, and arguably one of the best for many, many reasons, but that's for another YouTube channel. This was a little bit more difficult for my skill level to try to draw because there's no real definite squares or circles or rectangles. They're all angular offset angles all over the place, so and the turret is not one simple shape. However, this was a great way for me to learn about perspective and trying to gauge very difficult dimensions of an object, and that's one thing I advise with everyone who is trying to get into drawing. Once you know how to draw an object, draw something slightly more difficult, and that's how you learn and become better. I am a traditional artist, and you've seen there I draw with pencil, paper, and a rubber. And yes, I do have some American friends, and when I say rubber, that's English for eraser. After all, this is a work-friendly video. But I also love digital. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I use a program called Adobe Illustrator. And you may have heard of Adobe before. It's exactly the same company that made Photoshop. So every time you see a photograph that's been doctored or manipulated, that's Adobe. But they also produce this, which is Illustrator, and that's exactly what it does. It illustrates. So instead of a pencil and paper, you're using vector lines and digital marks to be able to create your drawing. I would say I'm a traditional artist, very much like, you know how you love reading books, and some people will read a real book with a paper book, and some people love a Kindle. I'm very much a real book person, and I have to say that's the annoying thing as time progresses. We feel like we're having to be forced into the digital era. However, you don't need to do that. You can mix up both disciplines. So here I will draw with pencil and paper because that's what I love doing, because I like to feel the tactile feeling of pencil on paper, and then I scan it using the work scanners because we've got great big scanners at work which can actually scan up to about A3. And I scan it and I pop it onto Adobe Illustrator, and essentially I trace my own work, which is great because once I traced over it, I can actually pick out all the things that I missed out or I needed to readdress. And that's a great thing about this program. I can zoom in to 200% and just pick out all those bits of detail. And I can't emphasize that enough. Once you draw the overall shape of whatever you're drawing, it could be, I don't know, your children, it could be your vehicles, it could be your house, it could be anything. Then you go on to detail, and basically your last stage would be the fine detail, which is what I'm doing there. So I'm adding all the fine detail. And you don't need to know what that detail is. I don't know what this thing I'm drawing. I don't know what it does. It could be a saucepan for all I know on top of a tank. But you add that because you go back to reference material, which you've just seen. There was a picture of a real T-34 tank. And a lot of people think, oh, to be a good artist, you need to draw without reference. That's rubbish. The best artists, like even at the animators of Pixar and Disney, they actually looked at real objects and constantly referred to them. They even filmed an actress and watched her how she spoke and how she moved, so they can actually animate Snow White. I kid you not, that actually did happen. There's footage somewhere on YouTube. So I have to go back and forth from the reference material back to my version of T-34. Anyway, if you really liked this video, by all means, leave some comments below because I want to make this bigger and better for you guys to engage with. And if you really like what you've seen, please subscribe, and every time I upload a video you'll eventually see what the overall composition will look like of World War II. Thanks very much for joining me for this video, and you take care and happy drawing.